that you go someplace and eat some great Mexican food or something like that, God bless you. Let's have a huge round of applause for Paul for saving me from a long, sticky sermon experience, which I'll then have to black out of my mind. Speaking of sermon experiences, our theme this month is Urban Jesus. We're going to be looking at what difference does it make when you try to do faith in a city. It's a different kind of an experience. And if you've been around the city for a while, you know there are a lot of different tribes of people that live in Berkeley and in every city around it. We would like to introduce you to a different tribe each week during the series. And so we're going to begin with introducing you to a tribe that you will probably recognize by way of 360 video.
Been like modeling and stuff, but I mean it's totally not my thing. Like I just think I'm a nerd, you know. I've been into video games and comic books and stuff. I don't know. I'm such a total nerd.
Hi there. I'm Brian. I'm an actual nerd. I wear these glasses to see. I watch Star Trek, TNG. I play Skyrim. I'm shy. I'm not wearing a nerd costume for Halloween. This is how I actually dress. And when I take these glasses off, I'm not suddenly revealed to be sexy or cool. I'm still a nerd. In fact, I get sick with fear talking to people. I'm not skinny enough to fit into hip jeans. The only reason I'm not very pale and actually have a tan is because I went eventing a couple weeks back and got to dress up and run around in a field. It sucks. I mean, damn it. Why, a sexy girl who went and saw second week screening of The Avengers is not a nerd. A real nerd is ashamed to be called a nerd. So please, get real. If you're not a nerd, don't call yourself one.
Let's hear it for nerds everywhere. Just one of the many subcultures that you find in most of our cities, many in this, and you see that video and you think, wow, Christianity for that guy, Jesus for that guy, really an urban Jesus, a city Jesus, not a suburban big box store Jesus, not Walmart Jesus, but more like independent communist coffee house Jesus. Is that really, is all of that kind of really doable? We've been thinking a lot about what faith looks like in the city, and I had to back up and ask the question, what is a city in the first place? I got one answer this morning when I came out and got in my car to drive to church and found out that it had been broken into and that my GPS is now missing. So if you'll put that in the offering bag this morning as it goes by, there'll be no questions asked if I get it back. And that's one definition of a city for somebody like me who grew up in a first-ring suburb of one of the old industrial urban centers. A city is a place where you get robbed. And so that was kind of my definition coming up. And there are lots of definitions out there in the literature that talk about all sorts of different things. But probably the important thing is that cities, according to one expert recently interviewed on NPR, exist and people live in them because other people live in them. So leaving social science in the rearview mirror, you can say historically that Rome was probably the first one of the really big cities, maybe the first one to reach about 1 million. Although there are scholars that say that Baghdad actually reached 2 million in the 9th century. So there have been large cities around for a long time. Now, as a kid growing up in old school suburbs, I always thought of the city as this, like the jungle. It was another environment where people lived this life that was impossibly unlike mine, and I could never understand it. And we only went into the city, we went on a bus or a trolley for something really special, like seeing a movie that didn't show in our suburb, or going to some kind of event, or especially Christmas shopping. We would go downtown once a year to go shopping because there were no malls yet. This was just after the last ice age, and malls had not been built. And so we would go downtown to do this kind of thing, and then we would get home before sundown, because after sundown, somebody could take your GPS. You know, there were the lions and tigers came crawling out of the bush when the sun went down out in the jungle, and you were going to be at risk. And so a city was something to be avoided, to flee from. to get out of Dodge, as we say, as fast as you possibly can. That was my frame of reference. There's one scholar that says that the only reason cities exist is because the advantages they produce are greater than the disadvantages they produce. And the cities that have gone extinct reverse that proportion. The disadvantages are so high, people start moving out, and you have a situation like Detroit, where population is plummeting. It's fallen off the table because it's just so difficult to live there, and nobody really knows what is going to become of that. Although there's a suspicion that young adults are going to flood in there, take advantage of low real estate prices, and Detroit is going to become like the hope of America. It's going to become this incredible place with 10 million people all wearing small hats and listening to urban folk music and shopping at Urban Outfitter. That's going to be the new Detroit, is what it's all going to look like. And so when churches and ministry-oriented people look at cities, frequently they see something to be avoided. Because in their mind, the disadvantages, like expense and cost, and people who may not be particularly friendly towards issues of faith, are kind of so great that the advantages of being there are just not considered commensurate with the struggle involved in engaging all of that. Now, Jesus was not an urban person. He was a rural person. Did you know that? He was born in a little know-nothing place called Bethlehem. He grows up in a nasty little Roman garrison town called Nazareth, someplace that no one wanted to be, even the people that lived there. He works in the trades, probably alongside his father in carpentry, day in and day out. 30 years, decade after decade after decade, he's in the middle of this place that even the Roman soldiers stationed there don't want to be. And then when he bursts onto the public scene, it happens in the literal middle of nowhere when John the Baptist, his relative, finds him near the River Jordan and baptizes him out in what would look like the desert to us. And from there, he rushes right into the major metropolis of Capernaum, which is a little fishing village beside the Sea of Galilee. He calls his 12 closest followers, from the people who catch fish really off Broadway, and then says, the Father has sent me to bring the announcement of the good news to the villages and the towns of this northern area of Palestine. And so he starts walking down the roads, going to these tiny little hamlets, and he is offering parables as he walks down these goat trails. And he is healing the sick in these itty-bitty little villages. And he is raising the dead in the middle of funerals that take place in little city streets, in peasant hamlets. And he is feeding the 5,000 and feeding the 4,000 in fields. And he is teaching the masses standing in a boat floating at the edge of the Sea of Galilee while they're sitting on the bank because out there's just no place to sit. This is the worst branding strategy I have ever heard of in my life. And it goes something like this. Here's Jesus' strategy. Take the most important message that the world will ever see and move it immediately to the middle of nowhere. In other words, find the major population center, which is, of course, Jerusalem. It's really the only one there. The place with an army, the place where the Romans rule from, the place with a garrison, the place with a wall, the place with soldiers, the place with sometimes hundreds of thousands of people during the holidays, the 3 high Jewish holy days. Take the message of the coming of the kingdom of God and make sure that the two never meet. That's sort of the way his entire career plays out. He's a rural person who stays rural, stays out, and yet, when it comes time to die, he goes downtown. Luke 9 records that some of the Samaritans, where he tried to bring this word about the kingdom of God, some of the people who lived in the northern part of the country, when he attempted to go to their villages, turned their back on him, rejected him, because, and I love the way Luke puts it, his face was set towards Jerusalem. He was intending to go there. Remember what happened when he told the disciples he was going to go up to Jerusalem and die? Peter comes to him and says, no, you can't do that. You can't go there. Let's stay out here. Sure, the Pharisees come out sometimes and criticize you and put you down, but just don't go to the city. But his face is set, and so he goes. Saw a documentary recently that said that probably the oldest walled city that has been unearthed so far. And of course, as you know, history is written by the winners. We don't know about the ones that have never been recorded because they didn't win the wars that left the records that the rest of them have left. But this city is in Mesopotamia. We would call that Iraq today. It probably had a population maybe as big as 50,000 and had walls, which is a key defining trait in the ancient world. And is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old, much older than the pyramids, in fact. And what the city at this point is known for, despite other than being a really very significant hole in the ground, which has been excavated, it's massive, like an asteroid strike crater. It's just huge. It's known for a story which originated there. And the hero of this story is named Gilgamesh. And in this famous story, Gilgamesh, among other exploits, kills a large number of lions, which in the ancient world is a pretty heavy-duty thing to do. And as a result of the popularity of this story, it lingers to this day and is still told in that region of the world and enjoyed by people after it was amped up by a local king who had the entire thing displayed on the wall in art on the interior of his palace, took the Gilgamesh story, which originally they didn't have beginnings and endings, they just had middles. So it just starts, he kills the lions, it's over. There's no thank you for coming. It's just, it's just the middle. So the king's depiction of it in art adds a beginning and an end. Now that's a breakthrough in storytelling. We have no record of that ever occurring before the Gilgamesh narrative. And other enhancements take place, and the story persists. You could go to this region of the world today and say Gilgamesh, and people would know who you meant. And as I saw that documentary, it made me think, it seems like big stories come from the city. Now great and important, significant stories come from people and places of all kinds. I understand that. And some of the really amazing things that have happened in this regard have come from very out-of-the-way places. But the kind of big global things seem to disproportionately come from these big global areas. So maybe it's not an accident when it's time to die, Jesus goes downtown. He goes to Jerusalem. In fact, he doesn't just go there. His face is set. He has a sort of a perspective on the city. He has a way of looking at this city. Remember when he lamented over it? Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem. You've killed the prophets. You've stoned the people God sent to you as messengers, and I've longed to gather you together the way, and he uses the analogy of a hen gathering up its chicks, but you just wouldn't do it, to paraphrase his words there. He's got this heart, this perspective, this face that's like concrete that's dried about this city. He has a relentless love, a relentless drive, a relentless passion for this urban center, despite the fact that it's the place that he's going to die. Now, he doesn't go there for the first time when he's tried and executed. He goes there the first time when he's only a few days old. His parents bring him to the temple and present him in dedication to God as the custom of the day prescribed. And then about 12 years later, with each Jewish male required to go to the city 3 times a year for religious festivals under the law, Mary and Joseph lose him. So if you're a parent and you have a tough day with your child, just read that story. You'll just feel so much better. Believe me, they lose the Son of God on a road trip. They look at her, where is Jesus? He's gone. He's 12, and Joseph backtracks all the way to the temple, downtown, and finds their 12-year-old son standing there debating the religious experts of the day into the ground. And says to his son, what are you doing here? Isn't that always the question? When Jesus shows up in the city, somebody says, what's he doing here? Isn't he the suburban God? Isn't he the red state God? Isn't he the rural God? Isn't he the Second Amendment, Bush voting God? Isn't he that guy? What's he doing here? We move here to get away from people, from that God. We have better gods. We see them in the mirror every day. There they are. My goodness, I'm just wonderful. People actually say that to you here, to your face. I mean, I'm not making that up. I've actually heard that. What are you doing here? And Jesus tells Joseph, I have to be about my Father's business. And today, my Father's business, it's not out in the hinterlands. It's downtown. Because downtown is where the big stories are written. He comes back over and over and over. And I began to study this through all 4 Gospels, and I made a surprising discovery. I found in my survey that Matthew is a lot about the kingdom of God, and Mark is a lot about the power of God. Lots of miracles recorded in Mark. Luke seems to have more to say about the Holy Spirit. And John, I was always taught that the first 3 of those gospel historians, they were sort of like walking through the marketplace, the hustle and bustle of the world. And the Gospel of John was sort of this serene cathedral. It was filled with theological statements like, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And it's just things that there's rapture in words like that. I mean, they're transcendent. They're just beyond what you just can't grasp them. They grasp you. You don't grip words like that. You're in the grip of words like that. And I read John differently this time, and what I noticed was 2 things. One is Jesus' teaching in John is very seldom in parables, and much more often is just declarative and straightforward. He doesn't use metaphor. He just says, before Abraham was, I am. Questions? Okay then, thanks for that. Well, let's just kill him. I mean, that's how they reacted to it. See, as long as he was in parables, it was all right, because with metaphors, you can always sort of guess what they mean. It's like being a theater critic. You know, there's 2 stars, 5 stars. It's like Yelp. And there's sort of no absolute to it. But when he just says, yes, I'm the Son of God, then it's time to pick up stones and go after him. This is very powerful declarative preaching. And at the same time, John records Jesus doing things in the city more than any of the other gospel writers. John is the urban gospel. And when I saw the connection between those 2 things, this transcendent, amazing description of who Jesus really is, and this urban, he's in the streets, he's at the temple, he's at the pool of Bethesda, he's at the fountains, he's out with the people, he's everywhere, he rolls all over the city. What rose up inside me was this, is that bringing the love of God, the announcement of the intrusion of the kingdom of God in the city, isn't about making a cooler church and then tricking people into believing that it's a better experience than their favorite Sunday morning brunch location. Out yelping them. Oh, you don't want to go down there to Lenote. That asparagus omelet, I know it's delicious. I know the coffee's wonderful. I know there's all kinds of people you'd like to ask out down there. I know when you stand outside and people see you in that line, you just look awesome just being in the line, because you're like at the trendiest place and you're the coolest person. And just to be in the line at a restaurant you can't afford, it elevates you. And all the ways that you come to Berkeley to be elevated by, just get down there and someone's going to come up and say, oh, this place is nothing compared to going to the 360 Church. Their cookies are way better than the asparagus omelet. They have fair trade coffee, which allows you to get caffeinated with a clean conscience about international relations, and coffee farmers everywhere. Today they even have leftover wedding shower cake and little tiny cream puffs. You don't need any of this fancy, dancy French business. You just need to go to a really rockin' church service, and you're going to have so much more. This is the current way that people try to do ministries. When I read John, this is what I see. Forget about cool. Offer the city a transcendent, supernatural, life-changing Jesus and call it good. Lift up the Jesus who is with God and who is God and call it good. And let him do the heavy lifting, because he's the only one can lift the kind of burdens that a city carries. When it's time to die, he goes downtown. His face is set like flame. I'm going to appeal to you today to set your face towards the city. There are some things that stand in the way of that. Sometimes the city seems like an enemy. When I found my GPS missing this morning, I got to tell you, that rose up in me just a little bit. I've been robbed, man. I'm from the suburbs. This is not in the social contract. This does not happen. I watch this happen to people on the news in other parts of California. This does not happen to me. The city is a place to be avoided because it's full of all kinds of things and people to be avoided. It's our enemy, and so we want to brush through as fast as we possibly can and then get somewhere else. This is what the Samaritans thought. They hated Jesus because he was going to the big city, because he was going to Jerusalem, what represented what they thought was a place of religious corruption. They despised him for it. To other people, the city can seem like a tool that is just something to be used and discarded. I come, I drain it of the resources that will help me with my life, my career, my education, and as soon as I've wrung the last drop out of it, although I may be paying significant amount of money to get that drop, I throw it aside like a crushed paper cup and move on. Did you know the city knows you're doing that and hates you for it? In polite circles, that's called the town versus gown controversy. Isn't that courteous? Isn't that polite? Doesn't that sound nice? Yes, the town and the gown. A little controversy. What it means is, to people who live here on a permanent basis, the people who breeze through to drain the resources and leave their money behind, that's the social contract. Use us, but don't love us. And so what they give back is no love. Or the city can be a kind of a playground. There's some pretty significant research that's emerging now about young adults moving back to downtown areas. That's been going on for a while, and so the rents are rising. Berkeley is going to add about 7,000 housing units in the downtown area here in the next 3 to 5 years. That's why it's crucial that 360 be in downtown. We are going to have what amounts to a suburban housing development dropped on our head here because of the construction of apartment buildings. You won't believe what this place will look like in the next 10 years. It's going to be like 15,000 people moving into what's already here, and an unbelievable, it's the opportunity of a lifetime for our congregation because we're already here. Sometimes people move into areas like that and decide that it's going to kind of be just an extension of college. The apartment buildings are a lot like dorms when you think about it. And they can fill up with people who are just there to absorb the amenities and sometimes don't give a lot back. Jesus had his face set. He went to the city to serve, to give, not to take away. I was in the back part of our house the other day, and I noticed that in our back bathroom, the little sliding window that's up above the shower that was probably put in sometime in the 1980s, the corner of the window was lifted up at an awkward angle. It looked kind of funny, and it wasn't fitting right, and so I sort of opened it up and slid it, put it back in place, and locked it so it was all squared up because I'm the husband, and it's on the job description. I didn't think anything of it. I mentioned it to Jan. She didn't think anything of it either. And then I was outside behind the house doing something, and I noticed that the screen was gone from this back window. And I mentioned it to Jan, and we thought, well, maybe it was never installed because we had our windows redone several years ago. And again, just let that go by. And then on Friday, a couple of days ago, I was out doing the dreaded mowing of the lawn because I'm the husband. And I'm cutting the grass, and when I finish cutting the grass, I walk back towards the house, and I look under our deck, and there is the screen from the bathroom window and a screen from one of the big windows on the side of our house. So I look at the big screen on the side of the house, go around to the side and check those windows, and there are 2 big screens missing. Honey, could you bring me that paper bag there? This is the screen from our back bathroom window. This is how we found it just before we called the police. So an officer arrived from the Berkeley Police Department about 20 minutes later, very efficient, a very, very professional person who really handled us very well. Came in, I shook hands with him, but I could tell by his slowness in reaching his hand toward me that he's not used to citizens offering a hand. I made him take it anyway. It's in my living room, wearing a gun, and tell him what has happened. He says, can we look at it from the outside? So we go back behind the house. He goes up on the deck, looks around, and discovers that the glass on the window is privacy glass, so no fingerprints can be retained by it. It turns out that to actually get fingerprints, it's not like CSI at all. The conditions have to be almost laboratory pristine, to have no dirt, no moisture, no direct sunlight, blah, 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 and then they can do it. And so he looks at this, I show him the other screens, and he calls the fingerprint tech to come over. And I am totally excited now because it's going to be like CSI. You know, like all of those good-looking people from Las Vegas are going to roll in this big nuclear-powered van. They're going to have massive equipment and those blue lights, you know, that you put over everything. And you go, there it is, and find the fiber evidence and put it in little plastic vials and take it back. And you know, they'll all be wearing Glocks, and it'll be very exciting. So while we're waiting, I realized that this is a Berkeley cop. He tells us that he grew up in Berkeley, hippie kid of a hippie mom. And he mentions the fact that the letter carrier in his neighborhood, as we're waiting for the evidence tech, is a mailman. And then immediately apologizes. He says, I only call him a mailman because he actually is a man. And then we discuss the efficiency of police dogs, which are outlawed in our city. Did you know that? And what they're able to accomplish, and mentions to us that the female dogs seem to be less focused in pursuit of suspects than male dogs are, but he does not mean that as a slam against women. This is just an observation of canine patrol animals. Then he calls me by my first name, Earl, and then apologizes, asking me if it's okay for him to use my first name. Now, I'm trying to dream up a reason why it wouldn't be, but I think I love this city. I love this city. Where else does a man wearing a Glock 17 on his hip apologize to you 3 times for coming to your house to investigate a possible crime? It's a total Berkeley moment. And he gives us his theory of how our neighborhood is. He says that there are 2 kinds of people in our neighborhood. One kind of people are people like us, whom he refers to as squares. Is anybody old enough to know the derivation of that term? Do you know where that's from? Yeah, this is a term you need to start using this afternoon. It's a retro term from the 1960s. It was developed by my age cohort, and a square is a very not hip, not cool, ancient, conservative person. It's your dad. He's a square. So when we were in our teens in high school, we referred to our parents as squares. Those are people who just really don't get it. And the worst squares were the people who think they get it, but actually don't. They're endlessly entertaining. And so he says there are squares, and then there are people who do the bad stuff. And so what I see here is this is the cop's point of view. There are people who can be hurt and victimized, and there are people that do the hurting and the victimizing. Now, at this point, the evidence tech shows up, and I am waiting for the nuclear van with the blue flashing lights and the 20-millimeter cannons mounted on the roof and the security patrol and the huge box of tools and equipment being rolled up. He walks into my backyard with a fishing tackle box, about 12 inches long, and a flashlight. This is the sum total of the gear. And he pops open the fishing tackle box, and he gets out one of those swirly brushes, just like they use on TV. That's what they actually use. Dips it in carbon, and this window frame actually still has a lot of the carbon dust on it that the tech put on it to try to find fingerprints. He did the same on our windows. He did the same on the other window frame. And on one of the windows, he thinks he found a print that is usable and pulled out that clear plastic tape. We call it packing tape. Puts it on there, peels it off, sticks it on a white card, and takes it back to the lab to be scanned and entered into the database. Even though the thieves were defeated by the locks on our windows, which the police tell me can be opened with a putty knife if you really want to, so not criminal masterminds we're dealing with here by any means, so nothing is like TV here. He thinks he gets a print from one of these, and during the lifting of this print, he begins to give me grief recovery counseling. This is how I know I'm in Berkeley again. He says, now, Mr. Krebs, you're going to have a lot of feelings because of this event. And I'm standing there thinking, I'm not going to have any feelings. What are you talking about? And I love this guy because he was so compassionate. And have you ever met somebody that's too compassionate? He's obviously so well trained. He can't top himself. Now, You're going to have all these feelings. You're going to have anger. And I feel the 5 stages of grief. Kubler-Ross is coming. And grief. And you're going to want to sell your house and move. And I'm thinking, are you crazy? Sell a house in Berkeley? Do you know how hard it is to get a house here? If you got one, you never sell it. I'm never selling. They can steal everything. I'm staying. I don't care. But my face is just like that. You know, that circuit breaker God has put in your brain. It works, and I don't say anything. And he says all of this great stuff. Just all you really need is a home security system. Don't get the fancy one. You know, just get the regular one, and it'll be just fine. His partners told me cut wooden dials and lay them down in the grooves of the sliding window. It's just even the police can't break in if you have those. And I'm thinking, this is just so, wow, I'm being policed so well here. They pack everything up. The one officer stays while the tech is working because the tech is not armed. And so the armed officer stays to cover the tech until the job is done. It would be a good opportunity for somebody who wanted to join a gang to hurt a uniformed police officer. So the other guy stays as his security. And so they both pile back in their car, very polite, very professional, and they drive away. And I feel like as a citizen I've been really, really treated well, except that somebody tried to break into my house. So what's the difference between the city and the other places you can live? It's that little bent place right there. That's the difference. Right there. The next day, Janet took Ricky for a walk. Down the street to the neighbors that like our dog the most. Everybody likes our dog, but this one particular family really likes him. Like, bring him up on the porch so we can pet him. Ricky's very social. He runs up on the porch. He loves Sponge. Any opportunity to soak some up, and he's right there with you. So he's up on the porch and being petted, and Janet brings him home and tells me, I just talked to the neighbors. They actually like Ricky more than they like us. And what they said was, their house has been broken into too. And so has the house down the street, the blue one. And somebody mugged one of the senior citizens who lives on our street. And they know who it is. It's the same guy, not from my neighborhood. He comes to my neighborhood to do crime and then leaves. And I thought, now, I kind of get what that police officer was saying. It's them versus us. And I paused and thought, did I just say us? We've talked to these neighbors and spoken to them. They're really nice. They love our dog. They seem to just be great people, longtime citizens of the community, been on the street for a long time, fix up their house, treat you right, polite on the street, all those things. But now, I've been robbed too. I've been robbed too. I'm in the club. And now, we are a group. The neighbors, Jan, me, Ricky, we are one. Because now we are all victims. And there's a unity on a street where people have been victimized that there isn't where it hasn't taken place. Now, as a right from the factory white boy from the suburbs, I have never had this feeling in my life until yesterday afternoon. And now I feel like I get the city for the first time. Because if you have a common story, all the walls come down. The big stories are written in cities. Jesus wrote the best one, the true one, the ultimate one, the one that's going to define everything for all of us, both in time and in eternity. And on this big stage in the city, he wants to write a lot more stories. And he wants to write them through your lives, through my life, through all of our lives. Because that story, that's the one that can bring the walls down. That's the one that can make us an us. That's the one that can say, we have all been victims of things here, and we all need to pull together and do things about it. Do things about crime, do things about poverty, do things about injustice, do things about homelessness, because we all share that by virtue of our humanity. Jesus has gone downtown. He set his face to do that, And I think of people who will set their face that way, that there is nothing that they cannot accomplish. You know, when you graduate, if you're a student here in the city, we are asking every graduate to stay here for a year to help us. If you get a job to actually work here in the Bay Area, you might think, well, how can you do that? I'm here to get my career going, to become whatever. I can do it because I gave up a year myself. Between my sophomore and junior years as an undergraduate, I delayed the completion of graduate school for a year to do something crazy like that. So I have no problem asking other people to pray about it. And if they feel like they've got to leave and God's calling them somewhere else, to make them look me in the eye and say, it is the will of God to leave. Set your face. Join the story. Lord, we thank you for coming for us, setting your face for us. We thank you for not waiting for us to come to you or waiting for us to be good enough or right enough or smart enough or big enough, but you just came and did it. We are so honored to be part of that story. Jesus, you've written the big story through your death and resurrection. We ask you, God, as we lift your name up, as we worship you, that you will call our hearts into that story, that you will stir us up for what's possible here. We've all been victims in a way, God. We've never had hope until you came. And now we have it. We ask you that hope would just rise up within us.